Miami versus Texas A&M. So I think this is the most intriguing matchup of the first round for many different reasons. For one, College Station is a tough place to play, maybe the toughest place to play in all of college football. Um, it's going to be at capacity. It's going to be rocking. All of those things, of course, we know. Another thing is they're from the SEC. So a lot of people are going to overlook Miami because maybe some feel like they shouldn't have got in. That's another conversation for the college football snubs talk that we'll have later as well. But I think that this is going to be the best matchup of the first round because you look at the spread and you have a 3.5 point favorite, and as I mentioned, you're talking about one of the best home field advantages in football. So you got to take into account that on top of them being a good football team, them being ranked higher, them having a better record, and all of that equates to them being 3.5 point favorites at home, which tells me this game is an even matchup, and Miami may even be slightly better than them. And just hear me out. I'm telling y'all, they may just be slightly better than them. And I'm going to tell you why. Because they played in the SEC, because Texas A&M played in the SEC, everyone gives them praise because they were ranked as a top 3 team in the country all year. Well deserved. Not saying that that doesn't make a factor. But when you look at their schedule, they didn't play any of the top teams in the SEC. In fact, Texas was the best team they played all year in the SEC, which was their last game of the season, and we've seen what happened. When they played, because I want to make sure I get this correct here, when they played South Carolina at home, South Carolina was not playing good ball. South Carolina had them on the ropes at halftime. And shout out to Texas A&M because the second half was one to remember. And they came back and won that game 31-30 because they completed a second half shutout in the game they were losing 30-3 at halftime. 30-3 at halftime. And you don't ever want to discredit the defense, but if you do something like that in the playoffs, you're not going to recover. So that was their game at South Carolina. Then they had a game against a nobody that they beat 48-0. Then they came back off of that performance that they ended on a win, gritty win, bad start, gritty finish. Then they lose to Texas, where they were 2.5 point favorites by 10 points, and they couldn't even score 20 points in the game. And we know this is college football, so sometimes it's like that. But again, I believe when they beat Mizzou may have been ranked. LSU, they beat LSU by 24 points, which is a good win, even though LSU wasn't near what they should have been this year. But again, you look at their schedule, they didn't beat anybody good that was in the SEC this year. And as I mentioned earlier, the only good team they played was Texas, and they lost that matchup. So let me see here. Just to make sure that I'm clear, and I want to make sure that I'm not missing anybody because I'm almost certain I know this schedule. I don't think these guys played anybody. So they opened up with UTSA, then Utah State. I'm sorry, I forgot Notre Dame, which was our common opponent. And we'll get back to that in a minute. They played Notre Dame the week after we did and beat them. Then they played Auburn. Auburn wasn't that good, 16-10. Mississippi State's not good, especially when they travel to you. They're a pretty good home team because they'd be rocking at their home stadium, but on the road, like, it's Mississippi State. They got a win over Florida, which wasn't any good this year. Arkansas. So when they beat LSU, LSU was still ranked at 20. So they were on their way down, as we now know. When they beat Mizzou, they were 22. So they were on their way down now, as we know. South Carolina game we already spoke on. Then they played Sanford, which is whatever. Then they played Texas and lost, which was the highest ranked team outside of Notre Dame they played all year, which Notre Dame was at the beginning of the season. And we don't want to discredit that win because that's a good win. I don't care when you beat a team, you beat them. So you say 41-40, they beat Notre Dame. So in a shootout, they beat Notre Dame. A week after Miami beat Notre Dame, 27-24, I believe this was the score. Actually, let me find out right here. But the interesting thing with that was, but Notre Dame scored, I believe, 2 garbage time touchdowns in that game to even make it look good because it wasn't that very good of a game. And then, everybody tried to discredit and say it was an early win for Miami. And then you turn around and, went to A&M. And now we know A&M was one of the best teams in the country this year. And, yeah, they beat them 41-40. So, and with that being said, again, this isn't saying that Miami's schedule was super tough because it wasn't. But all I'm saying is for Texas A&M to be here out of the SEC, they're getting a lot of SEC praise when they didn't beat any of the best teams or even have to play any of the best teams. And to consider when you put that into perspective that they didn't even make the conference championship because of a loss to Texas and you didn't play anybody else out of top dogs. You know what I mean? Georgia and Bama played Texas played these guys. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, y'all were the only team, I guarantee you, out of the SEC that didn't really have a tough SEC schedule. You got to play the teams that were underachieved in your conference this year, like LSU. But again, I think that this is a super interesting matchup because then Miami has, of course, a win over Notre Dame that was number 6 at the time, a win over USF, which is South Florida, for the ones that may not know, at 18 at the time. Then they got a win over Florida State, which was 18 at the time. And then they got a win at Pitt the last week of the season, which was ranked at the time. And all of those wins, 28-22, 49-12, 27-24, which we talked about the Notre Dame game. It was more, they closed the gap late, garbage time points. And then Pitt 38-7 on the road, like dominated them. And then, of course, they had the 2 terrible losses, SMU 26-20 in overtime, and then the loss at Louisville 24-21, which wasn't a ranked Louisville loss, but the following week, I believe that put them in the top 25 for a little bit, for a few weeks. I think this is a super interesting game. I don't know the trenches is going to be big because Miami has a good O-line. Texas A&M has a good O-line. I do think Miami has the edge up front, though, as far as that goes. The run game is better in Texas A&M, but the run game and physicality aspect in Miami with the better O-line, in my opinion, I think that the run game, whoever can establish the run game in this matchup is going to be key because I don't expect Texas A&M to be able to pass the ball as well as Miami. Malachi Tony will also be a big factor because if you factor him in, move him around, things like that, send him in motion to keep the defense on their heels for, fake jet sweeps and plays like that, get him the ball quick, let him use his speed to make plays. I think all of that type of stuff is going to be important in this matchup. But I do think that Miami edges this matchup in a close game because, as I stated, you got to go off what you've seen. And Texas A&M really hasn't beat anybody that would make me believe that they'll go into this matchup and just because they're at home, they're going to win. Now, do they have a fighting chance? Of course, they're the better team going in on paper, based on whatever you want to go off of. But again, when you look at their schedule for the conference they played in, they didn't have to see no big dogs. At the end of the day, they weren't the big dogs because they didn't even make it to the conference championship. And now when we're talking about red zone efficiency, Miami has the 11th best red zone offense in the country. Texas A&M has the 75th. And then on third down, Miami's 16th in the country, A&M 62nd. First downs, Miami's 5 better, so that's close. They're pretty close in sacks allowed. Passing yards, Miami's 15 rankings better. Rushing yards, as I mentioned earlier, A&M does have a better rushing game. But in this matchup, I think Miami has the better O-line. So we'll see how this plays out. But A&M is 25th in rushing. Miami's 77. So there's about a little over 50 gap there. Yards per play, we're in the same ballpark. Points in the same ballpark. Turnovers is another big one because Miami's 18th and Texas Tech is 70. And these are just offensive ranks, by the way. Now we'll take a look at the defensive ranks as well. A&M is second in the country in sacks. So kind of like the Bama matchup, I like Bama, even though Oklahoma leads the country in sacks. So A&M gets to the quarterback as well. But of course, Miami's the better passing matchup in this game. So even if they do get more sacks, obviously sacks matter. They're big for the defense. They're big to getting stops, but I think sacks will happen over the course of this game, of course. But the 2 guys on the other end, Mesidor and Ruben Bain, are problems. Ruben Bain is probably the best pass rusher in the country, so he's going to put a lot of pressure on them guys. And Mesidor on the other side, like if you double either one, good luck. And then we talk about the 2 guys on the back end of that defense that really don't get a lot of notoriety, to the outside world. But if you watch these guys, you'll get to know them. One's coming back from injury, the other one's there. Y'all will see them in action tonight. But like I said, the big, big ones is Bain and Mesidor. Them 2 guys are elite. They will be effective all night, I think. And I think that's why the run game won't be as effective for Texas A&M as it's been all season. But again, that may go the same for Miami because they have the better passing offense considering they haven't faced a team that gets to the quarterback as much as A&M. So I think this matchup is a super good one. Like I said, College Station, probably the best place to play in college football, the toughest places to play, the best if you're them, but the toughest places to play in college football. So it's definitely, a 50-50 game here. But like I said, when I put in all the perspectives and I'm looking at lines, Like my side tells me this is probably a true pick 'em based on them having home field, being able to sit as many people. I think it's 100,000 at their venue. Like all of this, them being the higher ranked team by 5 seeds, them having a better record, and all that for them to be 3.5 point favorites. I think that this is basically a pick 'em game here. You can't go wrong either way it goes. But I'm going Miami in this matchup. So let me take y'all over here to my bracket real quick and do Miami. And then you know what? What we'll do for now is I'm going to pick my picks, but we're not going to talk about them just yet because if for whatever reason someone that I choose to win the first round doesn't win the first round, we'll be talking about round two picks that are completely irrelevant. So I'm going to make a pick here, but then I'll get back in a minute.